how did the US and Iran restart this war, triggering one of the largest offensives with 170 targets hit? While Iran struck back at US air bases using layered drone and missile swarms, the Zagros Mountains serve as Iran's ultimate launching pad, allowing their missiles to reach Kuwait and Bahrain in a matter of minutes. So how is the US strategy different? Well, the IRGC had been attacking commercial shipping directly from the coastline. So the US went straight for the source, wiping out the launch pads to stop the drone attacks on container ships. But what specific Iranian targets did the US hit? This infrared footage shows an Iranian launcher taking a direct hit from an anti-radiation missile. And in this next video, you can see defensive earthworks hiding a hardened command bunker. A standard missile won't do the trick here. You need bunker busters. To crack a target like this, F-15E Strike Eagles deliver massive 2,000-pound GBU-31 with penetrating warheads. So how did the US pull off the largest attacks on Iran with 170 targets hit in just 2 days? Well, the US strategy is dismantling the coastal ports of Bushehr, Bandar Abbas, Sirak, Konarak, Chabahar, and Karg Island. The first wave, slicing the west, the strikes began in the west at Bushehr. The tip of the spear belonged to stealth. The first wave, slicing the west, the strikes began in the west at Bushehr. The tip of the spear belonged to stealth, clearing the corridors for heavy payloads delivered by B-2 Spirit bombers and F-15E Strike Eagles. The strikes began in the west at Bushehr, targeting the surface-to-air missile batteries and coastal surveillance networks guarding the region's critical infrastructure. With the radar shield pierced, the assault moved south to Bandar Abbas. From standoff ranges, U.S. aircraft deployed AGM-158 cruise missiles, obliterating command and control networks. At the Bandar Abbas waterline, over 60 heavily armed Tuareg-class speedboats prepared to swarm the Strait of Hormuz, guarded by Zu-23 autocannons on the piers. As American F-15 Strike Eagles approached, the manual anti-aircraft guns fired blindly into the night, aiming at ghosts. From miles above and safely out of range, the jets released a swarm of GBU-39 small-diameter bombs. Because these glide bombs are so compact, a single F-15 could assign a unique GPS coordinate to every single boat and gun emplacement in one devastating pass. In minutes, the harbor was reduced to a burning graveyard, completely neutralizing the swarm before a single boat could reach open water. What you are looking at is the actual video released by Centcom. These are the fast attack boats mainly used to harass commercial shipping. And out of nowhere, they are struck by a missile. If you freeze the frame, you can actually see the missile just before impact, and it is probably a Hellfire missile. It's a weapon that locks onto the infrared heat signature of the boat, making it purpose-built for destroying fast-moving targets. Further east at the port city of Sirak, the mission shifted to neutralizing immediate threats to commercial shipping. The U.S. dropped 500-pound JDAMs using the F-15E Strike Eagle on hardened military logistics infrastructure and coastal surveillance assets tucked into the rugged coastline. By destroying these launch sites, the U.S. effectively degraded Iran's ability to enforce a blockade on the 21-mile-wide maritime choke point. Then there is Konarak and Chabahar. Deep into the east, the offensive didn't stop at the Strait of Hormuz. It extended deep into the Gulf of Oman, striking the southern port cities of Konarak and Chabahar in Sistan and Balochistan province. Jets dropped GBU-39s as explosions tore through missile sites. By eliminating these specific facilities, the U.S. removed the threat of loitering munitions that had been heavily utilized in previous attacks on merchant vessels. Nearby, an airport runway in Iran'star was cratered, with Tomahawk cruise missiles fatally striking a firefighter on the ground and completely crippling the region's logistical air support. But how do most people actually make sense of these infrared videos? Well, what you're looking at here is an Iranian missile launcher, and in just a few seconds, it gets hit by an anti-radiation missile. Let's freeze the frame right here and slide the infrared footage aside. That Iranian launcher is part of a Baver missile system, and the weapon the U.S. used to take it out is likely an AGM-88 HARM. The initial blast from the missile, combined with the launcher's own rocket fuel cooking off, is exactly what creates that massive fireball. Well, this rugged surrounding terrain, and what appear to be defensive earthworks perfectly match the profile of a hardened command and control bunker or a localized coastal surveillance node. Well, to take out these kind of targets, an AGM missile will not do the trick. You need mid-level bunker buster bombs to hit the targets. F-15E Strike Eagles or stealth bombers delivered this GBU-31 with BLU-109. These are 2,000-pound penetrating weapon. In the third video, these iron rails are actually the drone launching platforms of the Iranian Guards. Here is the 3D model we created. As you can see, it looks similar. And the missile that hit it was a JDAM bomb. As you can see, this is a stationary platform, hence the use of this kind of ammunition. Moving forward, this is probably a makeshift runway, and the target is the supply equipments or munition storage. On the next video is an advanced Iranian drone, probably the Mohajer 6 drone, looking at the environment. A flat, paved surface with straight edges. This strike is happening directly on an airfield tarmac or runway. To hit an exposed, parked aircraft on a flight line with this level of precision, creating a localized explosion that destroys the target without necessarily cratering the entire runway underneath it, the U.S. uses precision-guided bombs. GBU-31 small-diameter bomb. This 250-pound glide bomb is the most likely candidate. The crucial detail in this infrared video is the reflection. The two intense white heat signatures, the explosions or burning targets, have bright vertical columns stretching downward. This phenomenon happens when intense heat reflects off the surface of water. Because these targets are sitting on the water, this footage represents the strikes on the IRGC Terra-class fast attack craft idling in the naval basin of Bandar Abbas, or along the coastal waters of the Strait of Hormuz, before they could deploy for a swarm attack. The weapon used GBU-31 SDB or AGM-65 Maverick. To hit multiple small mobile speedboats clustered together on the water, the U.S. relies on highly precise, low-collateral munitions. But how does Iran fight back? But Tehran's response was swift, calculated, and aimed not at the U.S. mainland, but at its regional hosts. The IRGC launched a retaliatory wave of drones and missiles directly into Bahrain and Kuwait. In Bahrain, they aimed for the facilities at Jafar and Sheikh Isa, home to the U.S. Navy's 5th Fleet headquarters. This is the very command hub that coordinates the destroyers and submarines launching the Tomahawks. To bypass the world's most advanced air defense network, the IRGC relies on saturation and precision ballistics. Instead of fighting for air superiority, they overwhelm American hubs like Ali Al Salem Air Base in Kuwait and the 5th Fleet headquarters in Bahrain through sheer numbers. The operation coordinates from the rugged Zagros Mountains. Mobile transporter erector launchers emerge from hidden underground tunnels, fire their payloads, and retreat back into cover within minutes to evade satellite detection. The strike hits in overlapping waves. First, massive swarms of low-flying Shahed 136 kamikaze drones flood the airspace. These cheap loitering munitions bleed the defense grid dry, forcing U.S. THAAD and its batteries to exhaust their costly interceptors on low-value targets. This is exactly how Iran would strike U.S. allied bases in places like Kuwait. For context, Kuwait sits just 150 miles, about 240 kilometers, from the nearest Iranian coastline. This proximity makes it one of the most accessible targets for a strike against a U.S. ally in the region. Because the American-operated Ali Al Salem Air Base is so heavily fortified with Patriot missiles, presents a much harder target. However, even a high target value has its breaking point defenses, meaning an attacker still has to launch in massive volumes to ensure a successful strike. To do this, Iranian forces fired more than 30 Fateh ballistic missiles, accompanied by a swarm of Shahed kamikaze drones. This saturation strategy worked perfectly against the heavily defended base. By flooding the airspace with multiple threats at once, they overwhelmed the limited number of Patriot batteries stationed there. The defense systems managed to intercept many of the incoming missiles, but that is the brutal reality of a saturation attack. If even just 4 ballistic missiles slip through the net, the devastation upon impact is catastrophic. But why did Iran fire on those ships in the first place, reigniting this entire war? Well, it all started when Iran tried to set new rules for ships sailing through the Strait of Hormuz. So, what route are cargo ships actually supposed to follow? Well, that's the ultimate dilemma. Right now, commercial captains are caught between two completely conflicting sets of orders. On one side, you have the United Nations and the Western allies telling ships to use a newly established southern evacuation corridor, a path that safely hugs the coastlines of the UAE and Oman. On the other side, you have Tehran demands that all maritime traffic travel strictly through their designated northern choke points. The IRGC has made it absolute. They should use the Tehran-approved transit lanes or don't sail at all. They've issued a blunt warning to the entire shipping industry. Any vessel caught taking alternative routes, especially that UN corridor down near Oman, will be stripped of its safety guarantee and treated as an active target. Which brings us to the ever-lovely. Why did this massive container ship end up in Iran crosshairs? Because her captain took a gamble. The ship was deliberately hugging the southern Omani shoreline, trying to use the UN-safe passage to slip out of the Gulf. But to Iran, bypassing their checkpoints wasn't just a detour. It was a direct challenge to their sovereignty over the strait. Tehran decided to make an example of them, and that is where all hell broke loose. Click the video on your screen to see exactly how the US attacked Iran.